Mechanisms of labour for a single fetus, longitudinal line, cephalic presentation in the left occipital anterior or right occipital anterior position. Mechanisms of labour brought about by the 3 P's. Powerful. Powerful contractions bring about descent of the fetus. Passage. The pelvis, shape and birth canal structure inform the passage and action the fetus takes. Passenger. The fetus is a passenger travelling the path of least resistance. Through a series of passive movements, it negotiates the birth canal. Note well, whichever part of the fetus meets the pelvic floor first will always rotate to the front. The pelvis comprises of the pelvic brim, the pelvic cavity and the pelvic outlet. The fetus negotiates each aspect of the true pelvis simultaneously. For example, in a cephalic presentation, as baby's head crowns, the presenting part negotiates the outlet. Most of the baby's head is in the cavity and the shoulders are at the pelvic brim. The pelvic brim. It is not the components of the pelvic brim that are important. It is the part the brim plays as a whole in the assessment of the progress during pregnancy and labour. It is the first test the fetus has to pass as it descends through the pelvis. The midwife assesses engagement of the presenting part through abdominal and vaginal examination. The pelvic cavity extends from the pelvic brim to the pelvic outlet. It forms a curve of Caras which the fetus has to negotiate in order to be born. It is designed to facilitate descent and rotation of the presenting part. The pelvic outlet is diamond-shaped space. Its parameter is partially comprised of ligaments. The mechanisms of labour. Engagement. The fetal head enters the pelvis in the transverse diameter, as this is the widest diameter of the pelvic brim. Descent. Contractions of the uterus force the fetal head down into the cavity of the pelvis, which is round in shape. The diameter of the cavity is 12 centimetres, anterior, posterior, oblique, and 12 centimetres transverse. The occiput is the denominator. Most fetuses commonly adopt the left occipital anterior position, as this is the path of least resistance. Flexion. As the fetal head descends and meets resistance of the pelvic floor, it flexes. Chin onto chest. This ensures that the smallest diameter, the biparietal suboccipital brachmatic, is presenting. This makes it easier for the fetus to pass through the pelvis. Internal rotation. The head descends and meets the pelvic floor. The leading part of the fetus, which meets the pelvic floor first, will always rotate 1/8 of a circle to the front. In this case, the left occipital anterior, it is the occiput. This means that the head can now pass through the widest anterior-posterior diameter of the pelvic outlet. Crowning. This is when the fetal head emerges and becomes visible at the vulva. It is said to have passed once the biparietal diameter has emerged. Extension. As the head descends the vulva, it travels beneath the pubic arch. There is no longer any resistance to maintain flexion, and therefore the neck extends pivoting over the pubic arch. The sinciput, forehead and face sweep the perineum and the head is born. Note that the shoulders remain in the transverse diameter throughout delivery of the head. Restitution. After the head of the baby is born, there is a slight pause in the action of labour. During this pause, the baby must rotate so that their face moves from face down to facing either of the labouring woman's thighs. This movement is called restitution. It is necessary as the shoulders must fit around and under the pubic arch once the head is free to rotate back in line with the shoulders. Internal rotation of the shoulders. When the anterior shoulder of the fetus reaches the pelvic floor, it rotates through 1/8 of a circle to the front, just as the occiput did. This ensures that the shoulders are now in the anterior-posterior diameter, ready for delivery. At the same time, you will see external rotation of the head, as the head now becomes in line with the shoulders. Lateral flexion. The fetus is delivered by lateral flexion. This means it bends sideways as the body is delivered, following the shape of the pelvis, the curve of Caras. The mechanisms of labour: engagement, descent, flexion, internal rotation, crowning, extension, restitution, internal rotation, external rotation, lateral flexion. Mnemonic to remember the mechanisms of labour. Every day, fresh information certainly entails reading in, evening late.